Good afternoon, everyone. I do hope you are having a good day. I have just come in from a walk and I just thought I'd just touch base with you guys today. Our topic today is Character 101, and the subtopic is Push the Button, Persist. I thought that was a bit catchy, so I thought I'd just use that. Push the button, persist. It's about persistence. Okay, so the definition of character is the complex of mental and ethical traits marking and often individualizing a person, group, or nation. And the persistence is the quality of being persistent. And a persistent person is someone who persists, who continues trying to do something, even though it is difficult or people are against it. So just to start off with a story, a couple of years ago, I used to be on the praise team, and when on my praise team anyway, like we would stand at the top of a rostrum and we'd be able to look down, and so you could see what was happening with people and all of that. I noticed this little boy. He was trying to get on a chair. He was only about 2, so he was really struggling. And each time he was trying to climb onto this chair, one of the church aunties, would go over and help him. They thought they were doing him a favor, but they couldn't actually see his face. He was so incredibly upset. And I was trying to send them mental messages to tell them to just leave him alone, let him face his challenge by himself, and get on that chair by himself. And one day, it actually happened. So one day he was trying to get on the chair, and there was actually no auntie there to interfere with his process, and he was able to get on that chair and sit on it by himself. And you should have seen the look of pleasure on his face because achieved something. He was only about 2, so for a 2-year old, that's an achievement. It's very much similar to the story or the process of a caterpillar and a butterfly. Sometimes we want to try and interfere with the process of a caterpillar when it's transforming into a butterfly, but it's important to just leave the caterpillar alone, and eventually it will break out of its cocoon and become a beautiful butterfly. So that's my story today, just to help you as it relates to understanding persistence. So there are some side effects to being persistent. So a persistent person is someone who does what they're doing regardless of the opposition, regardless of the amount of people telling them you're going the wrong way. They just keep pushing, they keep pushing because they're trying to achieve something. However, the side effect to that is there is a big danger of being misunderstood. So people are likely to think that you're being stubborn, and there can be some overlap. So there's some distinctions that can be drawn between being persistent and being stubborn, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And it's also important to note that persistence will result in pain. So the pain will feel unpleasant whilst you're going through it. So it's painful to be misunderstood. And there will be pain associated with your persistence. But when you look back, you'll identify that you've developed new muscles. You've developed muscles that enable you to have deeper insights. You won't just take things at face value. You'll develop muscles that will help you think deeper. So your thoughts will go past the thought process of regular people. You develop new muscles that will help you love deeper. So love people who are flawed just like yourself, regardless of what they do to you or how they handle you. You'll find that you have developed new muscles and other muscles, but those are just some examples of some of the muscles that you will find yourself developing when you persist. Um, it's important to distinguish, like I said, between being persistent and being stubborn. Um, Persistence, like I said, can sometimes be confused with stubbornness. A person who is stubborn insists on their own way, even in the face of evidence that the path that they have chosen is the wrong one. So, for instance, a teenager who has received guidance from their parents will insist on doing what they feel to be right, even in the face of evidence that the path they've chosen is the wrong one. So the parent will say, "Don't do drugs." The teenager has seen other people, their friends, do drugs, and come to a sad end lose their minds, end up in mental institutions, but the teenager will still insist on going down that path because they're being stubborn. They feel like they want to do what they want to do. So that's an indication of stubbornness, because there's nothing to be gained by that. So that's an indication of being stubborn. Stubbornness is also linked to rebellion. So rebellion can only occur when there's an existence of a higher law, a moral law, or legal power. So if there's a higher moral power, so for instance, God's laws, thou shalt not kill, for instance. Some people might decide, oh, I'm angry, I'm going to kill you, or they just feel like they want to kill you. For whatever reason, they might be under the influence of drugs, and they just feel like they can take the life of another. They're violating a higher law, and so that's rebellion and stubbornness, and not persistence. There can also be the existence of a higher power in the form of authority figures like parents, when they provide their children with guidance. I want you home by 10 o'clock, but the child insists on coming home at midnight or in the early hours of the morning. So that's rebellion, because the child knows what the law is, what their parents expects of them, but they're still insisting on doing their own thing and going their own way. That's stubbornness. And it can also be seen in the life of an employee who has been given guidance by their employers as to how they are supposed to conduct themselves at work, what they're supposed to wear. Perhaps they're supposed to wear protective gear to keep themselves safe and to keep other people safe as well. But the employee feels like they know what's best, and they choose to ignore the guidance and the laws that have been set in place by their employer. That is stubbornness and not persistence. Yeah. So in order to identify whether you're being persistent, it's important to note that persistence often comes from an inner motivation to attain a goal. There's usually an end goal in mind, and usually it's a good goal that the person is trying to achieve. In order to assess whether you're being persistent or whether you're being stubborn, it's important to assess the final outcome. If everything works out as you plan, will your outcome result in more good, or will it result in harm? And then you'll be able to distinguish as whether you're being persistent or whether you're being stubborn. If it's going to result in more good, then you're being persistent. If it's going to result in harm to people, either hurt feelings or hurt bodies, like people actually physically being hurt, then you're being stubborn. Yeah. However, sometimes even in being persistent, it might be necessary to break the law. So for instance, Martin Luther King, back in his time, when he was fighting for the rights of the black people, he had to break the law, and in conducting rallies and peaceful protests, he might have been breaking the law at that time, but he had a greater good in mind. And fast forward many years later, we had a black president in the form of Barack Obama in the White House. So his persistence paid off. But like I said before, persistence will often result in pain, and in his case it resulted in his death because he was assassinated. But he had a greater good in mind, and that carried on even after he left through other people. But he made a massive impact on that movement, and it produced good results in the end. So, moving on, the benefits of being persistent is the achievement of a worthy goal. So, for instance, Steve Jobs was persistent, although at a point in time he got ousted from his position as the CEO of the company that he formed himself. But eventually they had to invite him back to help steer the company in the right direction. But he was able to just introduce some amazing Apple products into the world that we all use today. So he did more good than he did harm. Persistence also results in life-changing experiences. So whilst you're being persistent, you'll learn. There's so much that you will learn. You'll learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about people, and these experiences shape you and expand the kind of person that you are. persistence also results in increased capacity. So what you'll find that because you're pushing against the norm, you're pushing against people's opinions, you're pushing against public expectation, you're going through difficult times, and sometimes that can be a lonely walk. But when you go through and actually come out on the other side, you'll find an increased capacity within yourself, and that will help you in achieving other goals. So once you achieve the goal that you set out to attain, it will help you for future goals as well. So how can you be persistent? Number one, identify a worthy goal. The goal that whatever you're pushing towards, whatever it is you're persistent as it has to be a worthy goal. It has to be something you're passionate about. If you're a child listening to this, or just an adult, it's sometimes you might feel like you know what you're supposed to be doing. It's good to listen to wise counsel, and perhaps even try out what they're saying. In trying out what they're saying, it might take you down the wrong path, in that you find yourself doing things that you know within you were not born to do. But it's not a waste. Nothing is wasted, because then when you find yourself being drawn back to what calls you from the inside, you'll have more of a motivation and more of a drive to achieve what you feel that you were born to do. So identify a worthy goal, and that can take time sometimes. So just allow yourself to have different experiences in the process of identifying that worthy goal. Obtain advice from a trusted few, but above all, listen to your inner voice. Usually there's something within you that will tell you you're supposed to be doing this, you're supposed to be doing that. So whilst you're getting advice from people who love you, people who know what they're saying, don't silence your inner voice, because that inner voice will tell you what you're supposed to be doing. Because as much as your parents love you, as much as people around you love you, they don't actually know you. You don't actually know you. So you're still discovering who you are, as do they. So sometimes people will try and give you their template for life. They'll say to you, this is how I did it. But just because a person does something a particular way doesn't mean it will apply to your circumstance. Just like the leaves in the forest are all different. Your life is very much different, even from the parents that formed you. So listen to wise counsel, but above all, listen to the inner voice within you. And if there's a contradiction, if the inner voice is telling you one thing, and your parents or those above you are telling you another, if you take your time, be patient, eventually you'll find the wisdom to actually follow that inner voice appropriately. Yeah. Next, keep that worthy goal in mind and remind yourself of the people whose lives will be impacted for the better if you persist. So I can imagine that Martin Luther King, in the face of imprisonment, in the face of adversity, he must have thought regularly about the people whose lives he was going to be impacting. He may not have known everybody by name, which would have been impossible for him to know, but as a people, he knew that he was fighting for a race. So, and then the same also would have applied to Nelson Mandela as well. So just remind yourself of the man, of the woman, of the child who waits for the gift that you have, and let that be fuel to make you persist in the direction that you know you should be going. Finally, in the face of opposition, look beyond the pain and the shame of the present moment, and look toward the rewards that will come when you actually achieve and attain your goal. Okay, so those are my tips for today. Please feel free to subscribe and go ahead and share this video with whoever you think needs to hear it. Until next time, have a wonderful day and be safe. Take it easy.